Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar. My name is Adam, Content Marketing Specialist with Schein, and I'll be your moderator today. I hope all of you are doing well and staying safe during this uncertain time. Today's webinar focuses on how CADCAM can help GPs add implant dentistry to their practice. If at any point during the presentation you have questions, please utilize the Q&A feature in your control panel, and we will cover them at the end of the webinar. Please make sure that your volume is up and any large computer applications are closed to ensure a smooth connection. This webinar is presented by Henry Schein Dental, and no CE credits are being offered for attending this presentation. I am excited to welcome back Dr. Justin Mooney to present for us today. Thank you, Dr. Moody, for being here. Hope you're staying safe. I'll turn it over to you.
All right, appreciate it. It is Tuesday morning here in Scottsdale, Arizona, 21 April 2020. And this is kind of an exciting webinar. I was given the opportunity to talk a little bit about the ROI for new digital technologies and how it relates to implant dentistry. And some of you may know implant dentistry is my passion. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dr. Justin Mooney. I grew up in Western Nebraska, went to the University of Nebraska for undergrad, dental school at the University of Oklahoma. Returned back to my hometown to be a dentist, a town of 1,000 people. I quickly realized that removable dentures and exodontia was just not something for me. So I started taking every implant course that I could possibly get my hands on, from Maxi course to anything that was out there, Carl Misch's courses. And through that, I just became infatuated with implants and what that is, because it excites me and it makes me want to get up and go to work every day. So I got a bunch of credentials that don't really mean anything other than I'm passionate about doing things right. And technology has been in the center of that. In 2006, I believe I bought the first cone beam CT in a private practice in the state of Nebraska, and I paid almost $250,000 for that machine. One of the few things in dentistry that the price has come down over time. That doesn't always happen, but it's one of the few things. And today, not only am I still in private practice, we have some general dentistry offices in Western Nebraska and Western South Dakota. I have a teaching center here in Arizona in the Phoenix suburb of Tempe. And we also have a nonprofit clinic there that we do dentistry out of. That's what my days consist of today. It's still all implants all the time, dropping screws. And let's get started with this webinar. I do have to thank my team at Implant Pathway for helping me when we got together. We talked about what is that ROI, because it's different from everybody else. I want to personally thank Dr. Steve Borholt, who has recently joined us, moved out from Ohio to the Phoenix area to be our implant director at New Horizon Dental Clinic. So he helped me in kind of putting a thought process to this ROI. And with that, let's get started. Digital technologies are available for us, but the truth of the matter is not every technology is right for every single practice. Many practices kind of pick and choose where they want to jump into digital technology, but the truth is most of it starts with just intraoral scanning. Intraoral scanning sometimes leads to in-office milling. Sometimes it leads to the design of the crowns or surgical guides or whatever that might be. It may lead to printing these things, whether it's a model or a surgical guide, or it could lead you to being a one-stop shop, having all these assets in your practice. And I think what I'm going to try to go over is, how these things sit in not only my practices, but many of the attendees that have gone through Pathway, and what we've found in the ROIs for these over time. Intraoral scanning is really where it begins. We can use intraoral scanners for a variety of issues or variety of modalities within our dental offices, and we'll find these in different shapes. There's lots of different brands available out there. I can tell you from my practices, and at the New Horizon Institute, we have 3-shape trioses, and we have Plan Mecca Emeralds. We don't currently have the Sirona Ceric. However, that is an incredible workflow, and it fits in, just like everything else. And Dr. Roholt came from a practice with Ceric, so we've done a lot of talk about that, and you'll see in some of our advanced courses we have. We offer Ceric, some Ceric training as well. So with these scanners, you can do a number of different things. The scanners start in my private practices by being part of the new patient experience. And that includes taking a full arch intraoral scan of both arches. And what I now have is I've got their models, and man, I've got a basement full of stone models from when, we took these and articulated them and things. And today, I can store this in the cloud and not take up any space in the basement. I don't have to run downstairs and look through them and try to find something, whether they end up needing a temporary or something like that. Or we can watch the wear of these, as we'll talk about as well. So we also use these intraoral scanners for guided implant surgery and creating our surgical guides. In our offices that are far away from orthodontists, we use this for aligner technology, digital wax ups and mock ups, the ability to communicate with laboratories with these virtual cases is, I can't explain what that's done for our practice, versus taking a set of impressions, either pouring up yourself or sending the impressions to the lab and then they pour them up and articulate them. And then someone literally puts wax to them. Like, we can do this virtually so much faster, so much more efficiently, and so much more affordably as well. I talked briefly about tracking the wear over several years. We can talk about, the patient coming in with the condition that they present with, and then going through, over the years, being able to track that wear. And really, it's also about cutting down on the additional appointments that a patient needs at the clinic, having that data available to us. I don't do every single implant surgery with a surgical guide, but every one of my patients, I have that data so that I can make that choice on my own on whether it's going to be freehand or guided, or, sometimes when the guided surgery is not indicated in those areas. And of course, we don't have any of that goopy impression material, which is a plus for a lot of our patients. Implant-wise, intraoral scanners provide, I think, a huge direct return on investment, an ROI for these digital impressions. Obviously, we talked about we don't need as much or any impression material in stock. Temporary materials, especially if we're doing the same day milling, or for me, maybe same day. Screw retained temporary crowns. I don't need to mess with the temporary material. There is a significant savings in the shipping costs to and from the laboratory, because if you think about it, you're cutting down on the shipping because you're cutting it in half, because you're only getting an inbound shipping, because we were able to disseminate that information to the laboratory instantaneously. And when we do that, not only do we have the ability for the lab to take a look at the impression before we let the patient out of the chair. But they can also start working on that restoration or guide or whatever it is almost immediately, so that it's going to cut down on your turn time. So it's going to save money on shipping. You're going to cut down on your turn time, which gets your patient back into the chair faster, which is going to lead to payment, quicker, and an increase in revenue. There's going to be less chair time for seeing the restoration. I do believe that intraoral scanning is more accurate than impression materials, especially in the realm of being able to get that perfect impression. And it kind of goes down to that bottom. Like if we missed an area, if we don't like that, the accuracy in that area, we can simply delete it and start over. We don't have to wait for the impression material to set up. And after a couple times waiting for the impression material to set up, human nature takes over, and we're just like, hey, you know what? Like, that's the best we can do. We'll just send it to the lab, and we'll have that done. So, I think it's really going to cut down on our remakes as well. And many of these impression copings are, reusable, and cuts down on the things that we have to continually purchase over time. Intraoral scanners often bring us, an indirect return on investment as well. And what I have seen from our clinics is it's an incredible patient education tool, because during that new patient experience in our clinics, you will see it's a real-time video of the patient's mouth, and you can see fillings, you can see cracked fillings, you can see the shade of the teeth. You can put things together and show them bites, deep bites, open bites. You can show them cross bites. It's a great patient education tool. And not only is it a great patient education tool, but when we have an educated patient, it almost always leads to an increased acceptance in treatment. And when we increase our acceptance in treatment, this technology becomes an asset instead of a liability or a dust collector over in the corner, because we all have those. I also think that, intraoral scanning, you've got to give it your best shot. There's so many people, and you hear so many success stories. And I, for one, have brought it into my office before and said, "Oh my God, it slowed me down. Like, just hand me the goop and let's do it the way we are." You've got to give it some time. You got to understand how this technology, works, how it implements into your system, because there's some protocols and systems in your own practice that you need to change to incorporate this in it. And one of the biggest things we'll talk about is incorporating your team into digital dentistry. I think that the impression that your office promotes throughout the community as being high tech is never a bad thing. And, provided you don't go around telling people how much this technology costs, it's better to tell people about all the advantages it gives, faster turnaround times, maybe same day technology, increased accuracy, no goop, all those kinds of things lead to an increased perception and impression of your patients at the office. Also, the patient's word of mouth, as they go out into the community and talk about that, hey, I went to Dr. So-and-so's office. She was awesome. Like this, it went so fast, and they had things ready for me the same day or 2 days later. You can't buy that kind of advertising. You just can't. I also find that my team members will swell with pride when you introduce these technologies, and they also are your biggest fans. They're out in the community telling people, how cutting edge your office is and how things work in their office, because they become very prideful in in what they're doing in the office. So when we introduce these intraoral scanners into our practice, some docs will just take the advantages that we just talked about it. less shipping costs, faster turn times, incorporate into a dental laboratory, and use it that way. Many of the dentists will also, many of you will find that maybe you don't need to send it to the lab anymore, or those single units would be better sent to the lab, and maybe more complex cases to the lab itself. So it also allows us, if we incorporate in-office milling, it's going to further increase your ROI, and it's going to give you that ability to do same-day treatments for crown and bridges, especially implants. We don't talk too much about real tooth bridges. I don't do those anymore, but I do make implant bridges. And depending upon the span, many of these machines will often allow you to do that as well. There's going to be less overall chair time, because I don't know any of the patients in our practices that want to come back more than once. Many people have spent so much time and courage in getting in the door to fix that tooth. Like, once you have them in the door, if you can tell them you can fix it same day, man, that again is going to increase your case acceptance. There is one of the downsides to in-office milling is if you don't have a lot of operatories, you don't have a lot of space for the mill. These things can be a little complicated, because you do have to, you do need a small little parking lot for people to wait for these mills to fabricate the restorations. It does certainly help with emergency care. I think one of the greatest ways of growing your practice is to be Johnny on the spot with emergency calls, people in pain, taking care of the patient's chief complaint. And if we do that and take care of their chief complaint in the same day visit, you're going to build a reputation for your practice that will be second to none. And that same day dentistry doesn't mean you have to. It doesn't mean you have to sacrifice aesthetics or accuracy for it. Matter of fact, I think you can achieve the highest level of both with the systems we have today. Some ceramic blocks can be as little as $25 a crown. For substances like Emax, there's other systems that allow us to initially do zirconia, partially centered zirconia. What you need to remember in this world of technology is it's literally changing every day. What one machine can do today, there's another machine tomorrow that can maybe do just a little bit more. And herein lies that conundrum of, well, I'm going to wait for the next version. I'm going to wait for the purple cam or the orange cam or whatever is next coming down the pipeline. But the fact is, at some point, you got to jump off the fence and get in the game. And, today the price of these scanners has come down, and, people would say, well, yeah, but what about today? What about, everyone on this webinar right now is probably unemployed. You're sitting there listening to this going, man, I just hope I can get back to work and I can see my patients. There's no chance I'm going to spend, 80, 90, 100,000 for a scanner and a mill. Well, what I do know is our practices are going to come back. I know this for a fact. This kind of technology is not going anywhere. This technology is the future. And as we come back, and if we're in a recession, the best thing we can do for a recession is to keep everything in-house. And I'm not talking about referring out ortho and referring out things like that. I'm also talking about keeping the lab stuff in-house. It may be where the mill makes the most ROI sense. And there may be some really good interest rates and money to finance these things. I can only tell you this from experience, is that I built a new office and equipped it with all of this technology in 2009 in the midst of one of our last worst recessions. And I am thankful that I did that almost every day. So when we combine it with this in-office milling, again, as far as it relates to implant dentistry, we can mill out same-day screw-retained and cementable restorations off of standard tie bases that we can buy from the manufacturers of the implants. So I want to talk a little bit about that maybe in the next couple slides. But the use of authentic connection parts, OEM parts, is of the utmost importance for you as you work through the digital workflow in implant dentistry. So we can use tie bases to mill crowns too, and also we can make full contour screw retained crowns. We can make splitted files where someone creates a custom abutment for us, and we cement the final implant crowns on top of those. There's a lot of ways to get from point A to point B, and point A being, preoperatively, and point B being post-prosthetic. But, again, the use of a tie base and an Emax block, we can often get the price of these restorations done in-house down into that $100 range. And I don't know about you, but there's not a lot of labs out there that have any kind of quality that are going to provide the restorations at that fee schedule. But again, some of this does take time, and without making an investment in your team and creating someone to help you and delegate this, some of these technologies in office may not make any sense, and it may make best sense for your practice to send to a laboratory. Either route is not right or wrong. Each route is going to be specific to your situation, and that's what I want. That's what I want to get out of this webinar, is all these pieces of technology may seem great, but as you work through them in your own practice, you may find that just scanning works best for you, or you may want to do the whole enchilada because you're a long ways from any laboratories or specialists or anything like that. For me, digital dentistry and intraoral scanning and implant dentistry has really paved the way for not only increased accuracy, but decrease the amount of appointments, decrease the amount of time. And when we decrease time spent with our restorations, the profitability of our procedures go up. There's a few images of full arch impressions using the CEREC Prime scan done here in Tempe at an implant pathway with one of our mentors, Dr. August de Olivia. One of, I think, the foremost experts in full arch digital restorations. The lab work and the lab mock-ups were all done by ProSmiles Dental Studios. And in here you see, we can even combine this kind of intraoral scanning with extraoral imaging, such as iMetrix 4D, ExoCAD, to create drop-in, fully digitized restorations that are extremely, extremely accurate. Because some of the fears of full arch, there's two kinds of fears to full arch implant restorations. We have the fear of the surgery itself and placing the implants in the right spot and being prosthetically driven. But there's also a fear of the prosthetic itself. How do I take these records? How do I create the position of 8 and 9 as it fits in the patient's face to give them the best aesthetic profile? There's a lots to go in there. We found that this is something that we can incorporate in Implant 101, and have created our own digital surgical restorative solutions courses to further enhance this digital freeway. When we say fully digital, digital means different things to different people. And even if you take regular impressions, when you send it to a lab today, most laboratories that know what they're doing, especially implant-wise, they're going to scan it and digitize it themselves. So a lot of it is why don't we do that in our own environment to allow for for the laboratories to have the best information possible. So fully digital in these full arch cases means no models. Yeah, that's right. There's no stone model. There's not even a printed model. We're talking about digitally designing this in computer software using 5-axis mills to mill those out and then deliver straight to the patient. We can have what I call no-touch occlusion right out of the box. Here you see in the upper right side, you'll see a PMMA try-in with balanced bilateral simultaneous contact without anterior severe coupling. Things that we're looking for in these full arch restorations for long-term survivability of both the materials and the implant and foundation below it. If you compare this to, an analog model and method and the number of appointments that we need to do and wax try-ins and copy milling, there's just so much more effort that's taken into this. And when we can go and have chairside adjustments in, 5 minutes or less, like this has really created a profitability and a workflow in our practice that is second to none. Because the future with digital scanning is only getting better every day. And I've talked to you about that. It will only get better tomorrow than as it was today. And if you wait 6 months, it won't even look anything like what you had. And I think you as a dentist, you need to be on the forefront of the revolution. I've been a dentist for 23 years. I'll date myself a little bit, but I've seen a revolution happen. And that is when I was in dental school, we used film. And one of the big things for us when we got that was a film processor that would not dip the films in the fixer and the developer, but actually do it automatically. And today we have digital x-rays. And I think very few of you have even been exposed to film-based radiology. And if you did, or if you still do, it's got to be on your horizon of changing over to that digital world. So you got to jump off, at some point. One of the things today, so for me, it was digital radiography, on the PA side. And then it was cone beam CT, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. And then today, the hot topic right now is 3D printing. And 3D printers come in a variety of shapes and sizes, and they come in a variety of price ranges. And this is something that so many of you can have in your practice right away. But you really can't use a 3D printer the way you need it to without an intraoral scanner. And then in our world with implant dentistry and surgical guides, you're going to need both intraoral scanning and cone beam CT to create the files and use the software properly. So we use 3D printing for implant surgical guides. Gone from using in third-party companies to create our guides that used to cost us $300+ to creating surgical guides that have this $30 or less in materials. Now remember, even though you only have $30 worth of materials in a surgical guide, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what that guide cost you, because you got to remember that your time is worth something. So if you can outsource to a team member, the actual printing of it, or the post-processing and the curing and things, then you can certainly drive the cost of that down. 3D printers for aligners and orthodontics. Talk about a way to make orthodontics affordable for the masses, because there really is very little product in this, and you can have some great outcomes, especially if you pick and choose your cases correctly. And then we can use software to create our wax ups, and then we can print them so that we can show our patients what the wax up is going to look like. We don't have to wait for it to come back from a laboratory or see, if they send it back to us in wax and it breaks, like all those things that, I spent most of my career, coming up against. So those are things in 3D printing world. When we talk about 3D printing, I already said that we have no choice but to talk about cone beam CT. And in the clinics, in our clinics, and down at New Horizon with Implant Pathway, currently we're using Acteon imaging, cone beam CT, both Trium and the Prime, to provide us with cone beam CT technology. And their new AIS software has built-in surgical guide creation. So many of our surgical guides that we create, we don't even need to export it into a third-party software. We can literally use the cone beam software that we've already treatment planned our implants in to create our own surgical guide, and then simply exporting the STL file to our 3D printer to have printed. On the right, you'll see examples of two surgical guides that we created in this software. And one of the important things to remember with surgical guides too is that surgical guides are implant manufacturer specific. On the right, you'll see these are BioHorizon surgical guides with BioHorizon sleeves. It's important that you use authentic sleeves and connections and parts when you're talking, especially when you're talking about guided surgery, because guided surgery, yes, they may be parallel, they may be in the right restorative positions, but if we don't have a system to allow for the drills to be in the perfect positions, the perfect depths, then we lose many of the advantages of our surgical guide. So creating surgical guides as this allows us to do more screw retained restorations because we can control the access hole for the screws, and does what I call decomplicate these cases. We can do it from single implants to full arch, and this saves an immense amount of time. Now, not all surgical guides can be done flaplessly. It all depends on the situation and keratinized tissue and such. But in many opportunities, if we can use the guide in that manner, it may cut the time of a surgical appointment in half, maybe cut it in 50% as such. Digital technologies, I think, are here to stay. You know, some of the surveys that we've seen out there showed that most dentists, think that this is going to be coming into their practice in the next few years. They know this is going to make a great impact on their practices and their business, especially in the future. And I think that what it does for you in the dental clinic is it does streamline the workflow to the lab or to your own in-house laboratory. And anything that you can do to increase the speed and efficiency of a system is going to give your practice a benefit. And if we think about how do we truly make technology have a return on investment, the technology either needs to A, save us money on the procedure we're doing itself, or save us time that it takes to do that procedure, because we're in a customer service business and time is money. Now, some of this technology will not only speed up the process or cut time from our procedures, it will also make the procedures less expensive, and that's a dual win. There's little downside to it. If you look at just the price of technology and incorporate it into your practice, you'll be like, wow, I've been doing fine without it. But if you look at some time savings and you take that time and you either do more procedures with the saved time, or maybe it's best to take more vacation or more time off with that saved time. That's up to you. But the technology is definitely there. I would say the easiest way to make digital technology have the highest ROI in your practice is to fully utilize your team. You've got to utilize your team. If your team gets behind this, then you're going to have the most success. And it positions your practice to be not only ready for the future, but it also positions your practice because at the end of the day, we have businesses, and at some point we will want to retire. And that puts us in a great position to look for those things. I don't think there's anything in dentistry today that engages our team members more than digital technology. Expanded function team members get digital dentistry. And when they get it, it frees up so much more time for the doctor to do other procedures. And that is maybe the true return on investment. Maybe it's not that procedure itself, but it's the freeing of the time and the delegation of the duties to your team members that actually frees it up. Now, unfortunately, expanded duty assistants, the definition is different almost from state to state. Some states, are more open about it than others, but it does also speak to that pride. I spoke about it early on. Our team members have great pride in their offices, and when they can deliver, when they can do a lot of the work, and they can deliver smiles and goop-free impressions and talk about the technology, man, what a marketing piece, and what an employee retention piece, and ultimately a patient acquisition and retention piece as well. There's companies like Plan Mecca that has seen this value in it and offers courses along the way. There's other places to find this as well, because that digital workflow involves three pieces. And if you notice, I put the assistant at the top. Like, the assistant belongs to the top, because that's like the gatekeeper. Like, everything travels through the assistant, from setup to breakdown to the procedure itself, to where it's going to the lab, to when we go get the dentist. Because the lab piece could be a physical laboratory off-site that you send these digital files to. That laboratory piece could be an in-office mill or 3D printer sitting on the counter in your own laboratory. And that assistant may or may not even run that portion of this triangle. So when we take a look at this, there's really not one piece on here that's more important than the other. As a dentist, we may sit over there like, well, it all starts with me. I should be on the top. Well, I don't know about you guys, but during this this lockdown, we've had some emergency patients that have come in, and I don't know about you, but I struggle to find anything in the damn practice. Like, I'm the most inefficient individual when it comes to coming into the office on an emergency on my own. So I would never discount the value of the dental assistant as it relates to our practice. So it does take a team, and I can tell you that you can buy all these technologies from vendors such as Henry Schein, and truly, I don't like the supplier or vendor tag, because and I mean this in our practices. Henry Schein is a partner for us, and we rely on Henry Schein for a number of different reasons. Could we maybe find gloves or cotton rolls or something cheaper on Amazon or something? Yeah, we probably could. But I can tell you that when you enter the world of digital technology, those pieces of equipment you see on the screen there, from the mill to an oven to the scanner itself, is expensive technology. And not only are the Schein repairmen and installers and the reps highly educated on these products, but they're also highly knowledgeable. And their job is to just not sell you this technology, but to get you to use the technology and get that technology working in your practice for increased profitability and efficiency. Because, ultimately the sale only goes so far. But if you don't put any blocks through this thing, like there's no extended return on investment for Henry Schein either. So a real partnership is getting this technology in there to make it work. I know that there's great training on mills and scanners and the lab phase and 3D printers and such all over the place. You really just need to jump off the fence, pick the technology that works best for your practice, and go for it. Because for us and I've said it before, like for us in the implant world and what we do at Implant Pathway, we're incorporating cone beam CT and intraoral scanning, 3D printing surgical guides, and milled final restorations in our courses and in our day-to-day operations at the clinic. And I couldn't imagine not having this technology. So that is my presentation. We finished just about right on time. We allowed for about 15 minutes or so of any questions that you may have. This is my contact information. We'll leave it up on here as we go through the questions. And if you have any interest in this technology, make sure you contact Henry Schein from their webinars, and they'll get you to the right people. If you have any other questions on how this is implemented into your practice, or you want to learn more about implant dentistry, myself and my team are open to you all the time. That's what we do, and that's our passion for it. So I think we've got a number of questions. Let me see if I can open the question box here. Let's see here. Question number 1. Can we work on multiple patients for CEREC crowns while one is milling and you want to take images of the second patient, or do you need to wait for the first crown to finish? If you've sent the crown to the mill, almost all of the systems allow you to move on to the next one. Also depends on the number of screen over here. It also makes a difference on which scanner package you have, whether you're working off a laptop or if you're on a server base. But definitely you can work on that. Let's see here. The one that Dr. Moody is talking about. I don't see the question for that. When we are able to print crowns as opposed to milling crowns, I spoke to Form Labs. They said there could be a few years later. I think there probably is. There's a, the materials that we use to print on the kinds of 3D printers that we have today are, for me, are definitely not like a zirconia or an Emax crown. I think aesthetic-wise, they're not there yet, for sure. And in the aesthetic zone, in the aesthetic zone, there's still a lot of application for sending to a good laboratory, because matching against other front teeth or doing one solo front tooth is always the hardest thing in the world. I do a lot of zirconia cores with hand stacked like GC initial line porcelain. So not only do we do all the above. We do in-office milling. We send to laboratories in different fashions. See question. What do you look for in a 3D printer? There's a number of things with 3D printers. Obviously, 3D printer wise, for me, I like quality and accuracy. And some 3D printers are more accurate than others. Build plate size, how many things can you print at one time and still maintain that accuracy? Again, those are things that need to be specific to the practice that you're working for. Let's see here. Is your Action, Emerald, CEREC mill compatible with each other? Well, the Emerald and the CEREC mill are not as necessarily as compatible, but the Action software can take any, mean, it can take their own cone beam CT. You can import a DCM. You can import a DCM from another unit and create the CADCAM guide software creates an STL file, which can just be printed on anything. So there is some compatibility issues with all those. But again, someone that's done a lot of these, like my team with August and Steve Vorholt and Chris Epperson, they can make all this stuff talk to each other and so forth. Which 3D printers do you use? We have a whole pile of them in our practice, and they all do different things. So can you design a mill for tie bases so you can't mill a tie base on the Plan Mecha system, but you can take a known tie base and mill out your crown and lute it together, cement it together right there as well. Also, you can use true abutment. You can use a lot of different ways of doing that. What are your thoughts on Sirona CVCT and CEREC integration with 3D printing and surgical guides? I don't have a lot of experience with the Sirona workflow, so I'm not going to speak in depth about that because I'm not the Sirona expert. I do know that if you incorporate all the components of one system together, that's probably going to be the most efficient use of that. And I know that I have plenty of friends and colleagues that have Sironas, and they have their guides made through CAD, and they seem to have good luck with that as well. Can you scan any brand of implant for doing screw retained crowns with the CEREC printer? Well, I can't tell you that every single brand is there, because I think there's 300 and some manufacturers implants that have FDA clearance that are being sold in the U.S. today. But what I can tell you is that any of the brand named implants in the U.S. are going to be in the libraries for the CEREC Prime scans, and that's from BioHorizons, from BioHorizons to Nobel to Zimmer, 3i, all those that are going to be in there. What would be a good starter 3D printer? Again, it kind of goes back to what you're, it goes back to what you're looking for in a 3D printer. Are you looking for one to do surgical guides? Are you looking for one to make you models? Are you, what are you looking for there? Like I said, we have a number of different ones. I've heard that some of the 3D printers are not as accurate as the lab 3D printers, especially for guided implant surgery. Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily true. There's definitely some that are a bit more accurate than others. Let's see, quick question. When you're scanning to restore a single implant, when would you want to use a tie base versus a custom abutment? For me, I use custom abutments in the anterior almost every time, just because I'm looking for that soft tissue emergence profile that's going to mimic the tooth. I may be more apt to use a tie base on a bicuspid, or maybe even a molar in the back. I may want to use those. I may want to use a tie base as a temporary prosthetic. So I could use the tie base and then create a custom healing abutment or a custom healing crown same day as well. So lots of. So I use both. The answer is both, but custom abutments almost always in the anterior section. Let's see. What's a good way to market launching digital workflows in an office? I think there's a number of good ways to launch this kind of technology in your practices. One is one is to get into social media and to show your patients maybe what's going on in that in your practice, and speed and technology. Like I think there's a number of things, and they're also good questions for your Schein rep as well, because they have a lot of different programs and things to put out there. So I think that's it for our open questions.
Yeah, I think we had a couple more come in from the chat. Is 3D printing vastly used for surgical guides, or can it be used for general dentistry as well?
For surgical guides?
Yeah.
I know people that use surgical guides as prep guides for teeth if they so choose to do that. But most surgical guides are created for implant dentistry.
All right, let's see. What would you consider to be the most important feature before buying an intraoral scanner? Maybe the compatibility with any other technologies that I already have. And if this is the first piece of technology that I'm buying, for me, the scanner is number of things. The price can play a part in that, but truly, I want to make sure that it can scan the entire arch from one side to the other. I want my scanner to be able to put out an STL file that I can easily share with my with my laboratory, and that I also buy it. I also buy it from someone that'll service it, because what I do know is these expensive cameras, sometimes they get dropped. Sometimes they need software updates. Sometimes they just quit working. That's technology, and it doesn't matter which brand, what seller, what manufacturer. Like technology has problems, just like our computers and laptops do. So I'd want to make sure that I buy it from someone they'll stand behind it and service it as well. If a practice owns a 2D unit and they're doing some straightforward implant cases, but refer out the more challenging cases, is it crucial for them to use cone beam imaging when they have a 2D unit?
Well, I practiced from 1997 to 2006 without a cone beam, and I placed a lot of implants in that time. But what I do know is that I wouldn't want to go back today. And I know that you can do it with 2D, but today the standard of care is truly 3D technology. And if you get in trouble with only 2D, you're going to be in trouble. Having the information that cone beam CT is there, knock on wood. I don't even need to knock on wood, actually. For 23 years, I've never hit a nerve. I've never caused any irreversible harm to one of my patients. And it was either because I was ultra conservative when I was in 2D mode. And since I've had cone beam, it's because I've known where things were. So I think cone beam is necessary. Let's see here. I got a question. My 33 years of experience, starting with Brandemark, Calcified External. Oh, yeah, I've been all there. My experience, tie-based leads to a higher failure rate compared to custom UCLA abutments, potentially lateral forces, inclines, low cusps, but still 1, 2, 3 rollers. Too small, too much stress on the screw. We haven't seen first debondings of crowns to the tie-base and screw loosening. I agree with some of the things that you say in there, and that the first generations of tie bases were too small and didn't provide enough vertical retention to that. But many of today's tie bases, I personally use the BioHorizon systems, and their CAD-CAM tie base is wider and taller and has more retention features, has laser lock technology on the underside for soft tissue adherence. And I have not seen the debondings and the screw loosenings from a failure in the tie base, nor have I seen the bone loss. I do understand, I've been doing this a long time as well. And I remember Carl Misch telling us that we would lose bone down to the first thread and then it would stop. And today, I don't expect to lose any bone. But I don't blame the tie base if we use the tie base in the appropriate positions. But I do prefer a custom abutment that creates better emergence and so forth.
Cool. Well, I think we do have a couple minutes left. So if anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A. In the meantime, I just want to remind everyone that today's presentation was recorded. So everyone who attends will receive the link to the recording of today's webinar sometime next week via email. I think I saw we had one more. Let's see. Which 3D printer is good to print a surgical guide for multiple implants?
We have a couple of them. I use a Sprint Ray and an Envision Tech, but there's a lot of printers that do it. Everybody has good experiences with multiple printers.
Cool. I think, we don't have any other questions. So I would just like to thank you, Dr. Moody, on behalf of Henry Schein, and thanks for everyone for attending. Hope everyone stays safe.
All right. Thank you so much, and hope to see everybody back to work soon.